Good morning, friends. Welcome to Coffee Talk this morning. Welcome to a chance just to hang out with us three pastors and to kind of get caught up on some stuff. And we want to just make the connection today of looking back and looking at what God is talking to us about, and then looking forward to what's coming up in the life of our church. And so we do that kind of just beginning by looking back at the sermon. Jeff was talking through Mark 12, where we're looking at the resurrection. And there was a couple of really cool things that jumped out of there. But my question before we jump into it is, was there a day, only because it's something you said, Jeff, that was there a day where what seemed like the worst day ever ended up kind of maybe turning on its head, where you're like, not only is this day really not so bad, but actually it's actually an amazing day. Like your worst day became your best day. Do you have a day kind of like that?
I think they usually go the other direction.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying it's really easy to say, okay, this was amazing, and it all fell apart. And yeah.
December 25, 1978. Super cozy, great.
See, if I do the math there,
and then
that must
then
have
it
been
was
right
just a
about the
nightmare.
beginning.
Absolute nightmare.
Wait, is this
and then
for
it got
your,
awesome.
It's his birthday.
for your mom or for
I
you?
don't know. I have no idea. I really don't know where so here's the first thing I need to say on that. I have very few best anythings. So to go down the road of best day ever.
Okay, not best day. Just
like
junky day.
right.
You know what? That was actually really good. Maybe not the best, but like.
Well, I think some of those unpredictable days become that. I think the one, in all sincerity, and this is partly why I caveat that with the best, because if my kids ever see this, they'll be like, "What about?" Right?
Yeah.
But I think, and we've shared this story before, but I think like when Micaiah was born, right? You had that. It was a good day. Things were great youth event, and then you had this like real not so great moments, right? Mm-hmm. Like as the whole birth plan, if you will, was chucked out the window as things become an emergency, and then it turned out pretty good in the end, right? And now to call that, I don't know, like it wasn't a bad day, but then it got really bad, and then it got really good again. And if you were to story arc that, right, you go through some stuff, but then you come out the other side and you're like, wow, that was really pretty good, and so there's, I certainly think of that example, but at the same time, I was just a bystander in the whole thing too. So I'm just along for the ride going.
You bore the emotions. You're the one that.
Maybe. Not alone.
No. I'm just saying. Sheena bore the pain. You bore the emotional. For me, similarly, the kind of 3 days come to mind, and the beginnings of 3 very important relationships. So. The first one is, I don't have the exact date like you did, but Cheryl and I'd been interested in Cheryl for years. And we had just spent a week hanging out together, and I was driving her to the airport to send her back to Japan. And I had revealed my interest in her early on in our relationship. She wasn't interested. I just tried to maintain the friendship and play it cool, but it's like, I have one more chance, I think. Maybe one more chance, like 3 strikes, I don't know. 2, I think this next time if I reveal it, we're done. So we stayed up all night kind of chatting, because her flight was in the morning. I just drove her to the airport, and it was really sad to send her and not to have things resolved. But I asked her a question, I think we've talked about this before, but I asked her a question that would reveal whether she was interested or not too, and I sort of did it in a way that maybe didn't quite reveal me, but and she got on the plane and left, and it was hanging, right? But it was this worst, best moment,
That's
right?
why that's why you're supposed to take a note, have a checkbox, yes or no.
Well, she tells me I'm supposed to run on the plane after her, like in the
okay.
movies, and say, I love you, and like.
And how would she feel about that financial decision of purchasing a last-minute
Last
flight?
minute flight to Japan.
I know. So, anyways, she goes off. I'm tired. I'm sad, but I'm also a little hopeful because she didn't shut me down. So I came
you're telling
home.
me there's a chance.
Exactly. I went for a run. I came back. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I wrote her a letter. I said, I'd love to come to Japan because part of she'd always said, come to Japan. Just I'd love to come to Japan, but I'm not coming for Japan. I'm coming for you. And I sent it. And it was freeing and scary all at the same time. So did my worst day turn to my best? I don't know. It was all a mix, but that was one. The others are the birth of my kids, all that. I don't remember that the day before. I remember that it was just like, oh my goodness, it's happening and whatever. And it was awesome, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing your kids for the first time. So
Yeah, that's good.
how about for you?
I'm not going to say my kids.
Yeah, it's been said before twice. So yeah.
I'm also going to say there was excitement for me, anyways. It wasn't my worst day, so it was exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the quick one that I would say is, what? There were some days in Disneyland where we would get up and it was like, this is going to be a rough one, and you get partway through the morning and it's just not going so good, and this relationship is falling apart, and then we're standing in line in the heat and all, and then at the end of the day, you know what? It actually all turned around, and we just needed a snack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It always kind of turns out that way, but there was one day in our first sabbatical in 2014 where we were at a retreat center, and we sat down with another couple who was counselors, and we actually had to bring up some stuff in our lives and in our work and in our marriage and our family and all of that stuff. And so as we're working through all of this stuff, there's some stuff that came out on the table that it was like, this is the worst day ever. And the stuff that I especially was dealing with, it just felt like the worst day while we were processing it and kind of getting it out. And through all of that actually ended up being the best day, because immediately following just getting it out all on the table, that was at the beginning of the week. We were there all week, and we were working with this couple who was doing some counseling. And we worked through that together that day and through the next few days, and it created the best day and the best week ever, so that it grew us together in ways that we couldn't even imagine. And for me, that was like all of life kind of just turned 180, and not for the worst, actually for the best in a really good way, because the stuff that came out was not at all what maybe your imaginations are running to. It wasn't infidelity. It wasn't like anything like
it's just emotional
that.
stuff,
It was
right?
it was actually just the buildup, and even the fact that there was a lot of like 1,000 small things that I had actually kind of just pushed, push. And the release of that actually was, it felt the worst, but it ended up being the best.
Yeah.
And the connection that Alana and I made through all that. So it was very important, but very necessary. And the reason I asked that question is because there was a phrase that you said in the middle, Jeff, where you were talking about the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. So this thought of resurrection, and then they don't believe in it, but they're asking Jesus a question, and in a very kind way, he just kind of said, "You guys are idiots. you don't understand." And are you not mistaken? I think is a really kind way of Mark putting, "You guys are so dumb. You think you have a gotcha questions." But they're talking about this resurrection, and then Jesus refers to, "Do you not understand the power of God?" And you alluded to the fact that in some ways it's possible when he says the living, that maybe he's even talking about his own resurrection, which is happening in a couple of days. And it just seems like a phrase that you said was, what seemed like the worst day when Jesus was crucified, it was over. It was done. If there is no resurrection, that Friday is so final, right? Like the whole plan of God out the window.
Right.
It's the resurrection that changes everything, right? And that's why you even used a phrase like, all of humanity turned on that moment, on that resurrection. That was the central point of humanity in that resurrection. And I think we think a lot about Easter as a whole, but yet that sense of resurrection actually coming from actually the worst day in history, what could have been the worst day, and we call it Good Friday, and yet it was the worst, right? And I think that's kind of funny too, right?
Yeah, I know.
And,
Wow. Yeah, it's Paul says that too, right? He says if it's not for the resurrection, we're to be the most pitied or something like that. I don't know if you remember the word, but what are we What are we talking about if it's not for life? For all this, so
Well, and that's the hope, right? In a world of death. The other aspect of that, it's significant in that it restores us to God, but at the same time, it also is a place of hope. Right? That when we look around and you think about, the first Christians in that century, right? More so for Paul than Jesus, right? Because the persecution was coming. As they looked around their world going, there's a ticking clock here. If not, and they did live in a space where I think they anticipated the return of Christ like imminently, but at the same time, it was like, if Jesus doesn't come back, we're probably going to die. So either way, like, which is it? Well, our hope is in Jesus' return because he's alive. He resurrected. He rose from the grave. Therefore, we can have hope. And I think we lose sight of that a little bit because we're still going, so it's coming? Really? And so we forget that, no, he is returning. He's alive. And more than that, as his Spirit is in us, propelling us further into life. And so we have hope in that too, that we are not hopeless people. Regardless of what goes on in our world, we can have hope.
And
it's so beautiful.
I think that's also why even a book like The Case for Christ was so instrumental in my development, because it really pointed to, you could talk about a lot of things, but let's specifically talk about the resurrection. Because if that was real, everything changed. Everything is different, and there's you can then look back. You can take the gospel and flip it backwards and say, if the resurrection is real, which it is, then let's look at what Jesus said here. Let's look at what Jesus said here. Let's look at what Jesus said here. Whereas sometimes it's like, if you flip that around, it's like, Jesus sounds like a crazy person. Jesus is saying all this stuff. Jesus is like, flipping tables and, throwing out all these truths, and you're like, okay, that sounds really good, but are you sure? Oh, there's a resurrection. Oh, we can trust him now, right? But in some ways, it's almost like we have to flip that around.
Well, I mean, for us on this side of history, that's the lens through which we view all of Scripture leading up to that. And so it's you're right. We subconsciously or consciously, like whether we're aware of it or not, we do kind of view it that way, right? As we come on a Sunday morning, as we open our Bibles throughout the week, as whenever we have that benefit, if you will. And I think that's where Paul centered his writings too, right? Is helping people then realize that lens, that they see it through the resurrection. And he's often writing to people who didn't yet have that view. And
it makes you realize what an amazing time period we get to be living in, because there's a part of me that's like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome to be there with Peter? But they had they just they're living this. It's amazing, but it's also they didn't see the big picture.
Right.
We see the whole thing. We can look, and
Wow.
like you said, we can read the.
Portion of the whole thing. We still don't have God's perspective of.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I understand what you're saying. I
We see what He's revealed fully,
Yes, yeah.
at this point, and
we see more.
yeah, and we
Right.
even see that He's coming back, and
Yeah.
that we can trust whatever happens.
Yeah.
He's coming back, and He's told that. Yeah.
And yet, even on top of that, like, we still don't have a clear picture, because even thinking about, like,
Yeah,
some
that's
of
true.
Paul's letters, okay, that's lost, we couldn't find that got burned, that got
Yeah.
stolen, right? And yet, what we do have is still a very comprehensive picture, enough of a picture that God said, this is the Holy Scriptures. This is the authority that we are to go by. Even though there's all this other stuff, it still doesn't feel like a comprehensive picture, and yet it's actually all that we need, right? At
And
the
that's
end,
where faith comes in, right?
yeah, and at the end of John, right? Remember, he says, "Blessed are those who have not even seen all of this, everything that we just talked about,
Yeah.
and yet you still believe." Right?
Yeah.
We've never met Jesus in person in the flesh. We never walked with him, talked with him, ate the fish and the bread and all of that, and yet we still believe. And yet for those people, that was a really big thing, because they walked with him and talked with him, and they were there, and shoot, now he's dead. Oh, great, he's alive.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
that would be an unbelievable time to live in, I feel like, too.
Yeah. It's just not like, oh, then it would be all clear.
Yeah.
That's not
Like
not the point of living at that time.
Wow.
It would feel harder, because there's less of what feels like certainty, right? Like with our perspective, we want that sense of certainty. Okay, history and scripture and all of that. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, we can see that this is what Jesus actually taught. Whereas, like, even like that time before, like after the resurrection, before some of this stuff was being written down, it was like all word of mouth, and like, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that line's a little bit of a dig at Thomas? And I mean, I don't think it is, but I wonder how, like, often he becomes like the whipping boy, right? Like that, oh
Yeah.
man, I can't believe you didn't believe.
Yeah.
And yet, I wonder how often he was just expressing out loud what everybody was
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
inside.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? That, no, unless I see it, unless I touch it. And I think we meet people every day who, and sometimes even ourselves, we are Thomas.
Yeah.
Where we're just like,
Oh,
man,
yeah.
I can't believe today.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think that's the beautiful thing about his inclusion as a disciple and in the Gospels, is that he's so authentic in that. And I think too, even the on the mount with Jesus, I think it's Matthew's line, right? They worship, yet some still doubted.
Yep.
And that idea that we come in faith, and us, like the disciples then, there's some days or most days or whatever, where we're going to worship God, but we're just going to admit we don't have it all figured out.
Yep.
There's still some areas that we're not certain of, and we still have doubt, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's a beautiful inclusion of us too in this.
And yet, when they understood it,
Yeah.
they were a force to be reckoned with. They changed the whole world and changed the course of history, changed even the year that we're living in. Like, all of these things, we're no longer living in the era of whatever leader, but we won't say that, right? Like, we think about how much these guys changed because they understood it, and they went and they changed the world. Which also reminds me, there's somebody who's going around the world that understands it, that got it, that said, God, you've changed my life, and now I'm going to follow you in all of these things. And that is Lyndon Dojon. In case you were unaware, he had kind of talked about it earlier, I think. Did you talk about it earlier? He is off to Turkey, and he's there right now. He is going for a couple weeks, 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And he is right now on the ground, and they are with a team from GAIN, Global Aid Network. So Lyndon and a lot of the team that has been already trained in a lot of disaster and first response and stuff like that. They are on the ground in Turkey right now, and they are handing out water bottles. They're setting up temporary shelters. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They're working with people. They're trying to work with a lot of the organizations that are already there because it just is widespread, chaos in the midst of this this tragedy that has hit Turkey. And so we can be continuing to pray for him as a local missionary, that he's kind of being our hands and feet, and we can send him off with our blessing as well. He's already there, so but you can be thinking about him. And so that's already happening right now. And then this Sunday, there's some stuff coming up. Jeff, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I think we said it's a time change on Saturday night, is it?
Yeah.
Are we sure? I actually didn't look it up.
No, it is.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's
this
a time
Sunday.
change on
This Sunday.
Saturday night. So you spring forward. So what's now, whatever time it is, it'll be an hour later. And so make sure our clocks seem to do this for us now with our smartphones and everything. But if you don't go by a smartphone, if you go by the clock on your oven, you probably have to set that forward. And then after the service on Sunday morning, we are having a soup and bun luncheon. So just invite everybody to go into the fellowship hall, and we're going to have some different soups and some buns and just hang out and chat. The whole idea is to make connections. And
Was it intentional that we did this on the time change? Because I feel like it's the perfect week for it. Because if I've got this right, and maybe I don't, but if you forget to change your clock and you show up, you'll be an hour late for church.
You'll be an hour
right on
late.
time for lunch.
Right on time for soup,
right.
right?
I feel like that's
what I was thinking
brilliant.
about too. So I don't know about you guys. I actually, I will maybe change one clock, but I will leave another one, like a manual change one, just as is. Because I know that these automatically do it, but sometimes if it makes that change in the middle of the night and then you wake up
you're not sure.
early, you're like,
did it really happen?
I just don't know. So being able to confirm with the clock on the wall or on the microwave, I actually have to do that because it freaks me out that much. Shoot, am I going to be an hour late, right?
Yeah.
And this is the one where you're going to be an hour late, not an hour early. You're going to be an hour late, which is not the end of the world.
Yeah, we lose sleep, an hour of sleep. So go to bed an hour early.
If you wake up at 5 to 10 or 5 to 10 the new time, please don't panic and rush down here and run in and freak out.
Yeah.
We're not going to throw you under the bus.
Yeah.
But we will gladly serve you soup
And
afterwards
if you show up for soup and we notice, we might be like, time change. But we won't say, what are you?
We'll put you on dish duty. How about that?
We won't shame you. We are excited to see you.
Here's the one thing I like about this aspect of time change. It's the one day a year my kids sleep in.
Yeah, of course.
The one day a year where they sleep in. And so, happy kids sleeping in day to those who celebrate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyways, make
Except-
sure you mark your calendars for that.
I do feel like sometimes it means, okay, this is going to make for a terrible Monday morning.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
However, this morning one of them was up at 6. So that'll just be 7.
Yeah.
It's perfect. We're still not late.
Great.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. Yeah. So that's this Sunday. So you can be looking forward to that. And then a couple weeks from now, April 1st. Chris, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, April 1st is our next West Kelowna-wide joint parenting seminar, and it's on the topic of walking with 10,000 conversations, 1,000 conversations. I always get confused
1,000.
between, it's 1,000?
Yeah.
Because I always in my brain go, wait, but then there's like this store that's 10,000 villages, so I just lose track of decimals. Anyways, 1,000 little conversations. It's about having not just the talk with your kids and teenagers, but a lifelong conversation about healthy sexuality, human flourishing, and taking the awkward out of the awkward conversations. And so that'll be hosted at Potter's House Church, and you can register online. There's an Eventbrite page. You can link to that through our website and all of that.
We'll put a link in description as well.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So just to be clear, this isn't just for parents, like it can be for grandparents as well?
Well,
or-
it can be. I
Okay.
mean, if you want to be that grandparent that has, if you're having those conversations with kids, that's great. Anyone's welcome.
Okay.
We're not going to be
Yeah.
like, we're not going to at the door be like, show us a picture of the kids in your life.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we don't need to verify.
No, it's just,
it's for anyone, but
It's a pretty powerful
It's
idea, right? That we
yeah,
we're
totally.
not- yeah.
And so, yes, everyone's welcome. It can be for grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever. But it is focused at the parental caregivers,
Okay.
or the
Yeah.
caregivers, I should
Yeah.
say. Because, and it's not aimed at teenagers themselves or, you know, kids themselves. It's
Yeah.
really targeted at caregivers.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
and
that's a good question.
We've done this before, but I would encourage, no matter how young your kids are, this would be helpful, because
Yeah.
you want to start these things early in preparation for, you know. Once your kid starts asking questions at 13, they if they do, or once you start trying to initiate that, they already have heard a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you might, you know, have grown up in a home where all of a sudden one day you woke up and there was a little book on your dresser you had to read, or, you know, you get
Yeah.
that little note, hey, we need to talk, and,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
it's suddenly, what's this? But, so yeah, sooner is better, because then, you know, younger kids are a little more adept to just talking, and
Yeah.
that's great, and
Yeah.
before
You make it more
before
natural
their
and-
friends go, that's weird, or
Yeah.
anything. But,
Right.
you know, so yes, young is good. You know, we've said before they hear it from someone on the playground, or you have to, you know, then correct information. But,
it's not too late either. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
If
yeah.
you're a parent of a kid,
I mean, hey, if your kid's
Yeah.
3 or 4, you might go, okay, this is something for the future, but sure, put it away for the future.
yeah, it'd be good to
Yep.
go now too. Yeah.
So you can look forward to that. You can sign up right away, and we encourage you to share that event with others. The more the better. Not the more the merrier. The more the better, because then we are being able to grow in all of this together, and it's a good way to support one another too. So you can be looking forward to that, and thanks for hanging out with us this morning. Hope you're having a wonderful week, and we will see you soon, and we'll see you an hour earlier on Sunday.